Under the blazing midday sun, the unit crawled through burning sand and barbed wire obstacles. In the corner of the training ground, a small woman lay sleeping, her cap pulled down over her face. "She's completely useless," a recruit shouted in frustration. Suddenly, alarm bells rang. The drill became a simulated combat scenario. Smoke and explosions erupted everywhere. The commander didn't call the whole team. Instead, he looked directly at her and shouted, "Execute! Shadow 7! Exclamation mark." She bolted upright, voice calm. "Roger that." In 40 seconds, every target was down. The entire training ground fell silent. Elena Cruz was 27 years old, small in stature, with long brown hair and eyes that always seemed half-closed, as if she never got enough sleep. She had been assigned to train alongside new SEAL recruits, but every single day the same scene played out over and over again. While her teammates ran obstacle courses, practiced shooting, and threw training grenades, Elena would sit slumped over, nodding off to sleep. The whispers followed her everywhere. "She's just dead weight. Must have connections to even be here. How did someone like her make it past basic screening?" Some of the soldiers would throw small stones or old boots at her as a joke. Elena never reacted. She would just pull her cap down lower over her face and continue her apparent napping. A staff sergeant shook his head in disgust. "Bringing this girl along is a complete waste of time and resources." But Elena never missed a single training session. Every day, she showed up and repeated the same routine of appearing to sleep through everything. What none of them knew was what happened after lights out. When the entire unit was asleep, Elena would quietly slip out to the armory. She would clean every single weapon, check each scope, test every piece of equipment. Her movements in the darkness were precise, methodical, perfect. The night guard later recalled, "One time I woke up unexpectedly in the middle of the night. I saw her practicing weapon disassembly in complete darkness. She was so fast I couldn't believe my eyes. It was like watching a machine operate. During the day, she would study the other recruits. She memorized their strengths, their weaknesses, their reaction times under pressure. She knew exactly who would panic first, who would freeze, who would make the wrong call. But she kept all of this knowledge to herself, hidden behind the mask of a sleepy, incompetent soldier. The other recruits continued their mockery. They made jokes about her at meals. They complained about having to carry someone so useless through their training. They even started a betting pool on how long it would take before she was kicked out. Elena heard every word. She saw every sneer, every eye roll, every gesture of contempt. But she never responded. She never defended herself. She never showed them what she was truly capable of. Because the last time she had shown her true abilities, people had died. So she maintained her cover, day after day, enduring their ridicule while secretly preparing for the moment when her skills might be needed. The moment when lives would depend on her training, her instincts, her willingness to do what others couldn't. That moment came sooner than anyone expected. It was another scorching afternoon drill. The unit was running tactical exercises under the brutal desert sun. Sweat poured down their faces as they navigated through combat scenarios designed to push them to their limits. Elena, as always, was lying in the shade at the edge of the training ground, her cap pulled low over her face, appearing to be fast asleep. A young recruit, frustrated and exhausted from the heat, finally snapped, "This is ridiculous. She's completely useless. Why is she even here?" Other soldiers began to murmur their agreement. The resentment that had been building for weeks was finally boiling over. That's when the emergency alarms suddenly screamed to life. The training drill instantly transformed into a simulated live combat scenario. Smoke grenades exploded across the training ground. The sound of simulated gunfire and explosions filled the air. Panic erupted among the recruits. Some froze in place. Others scrambled for cover, their weapons shaking in their hands. The carefully practiced formations fell apart as fear took over. In the chaos, Commander Ross Hale didn't shout orders to the entire unit like he normally would. Instead, he looked directly at the woman everyone thought was sleeping. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Execute, Shadow 7." The entire unit stopped dead. Shadow 7. What the hell is Shadow 7? Elena's eyes snapped open, and for the first time, they were completely alert. Sharp, dangerous. She rolled to her feet in one fluid motion, her training weapon appearing in her hands as if by magic. Gone was any trace of the sleepy, incompetent woman they all knew. Her voice was steady and professional. "Roger that, Commander." What happened next defied belief. Elena moved like lightning. She sprinted across the training ground, her body low and efficient. Every movement was calculated, precise, deadly. She engaged the first set of targets with a controlled burst of fire. Direct hits. She rolled to new cover before the simulated enemy could return fire. A smoke grenade landed perfectly, creating a screen that allowed her teammates to advance. She had thrown it without even looking, somehow knowing exactly where it needed to land. She flanked left, then right, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Target after target fell to her accurate fire. She moved through the obstacle course like it was a gentle stroll through a park. When other recruits hesitated or made mistakes, Elena was already 3 steps ahead, covering their positions, clearing their paths, making their jobs easier. In exactly 40 seconds, every single training target had been neutralized. Every objective had been completed. What should have been a 20-minute exercise was over before most of the recruits had even figured out what was happening. The training ground fell completely silent, except for the sound of settling smoke. Everyone stared at Elena. She stood in the center of the course, weapon at ready position, not even breathing hard. Her eyes swept the area professionally, still checking for additional threats. One of the staff sergeants whispered to his colleague, "I've seen that call sign Shadow 7 in classified files. I never thought it was her." Another recruit, the same one who had called her useless just minutes before, stood with his mouth hanging open. What just happened? Commander Hale walked onto the training ground, his expression unreadable. What happened is that Shadow 7 just showed you how it's done. Elena safetied her weapon and began walking back toward her usual spot in the shade. But now, every eye followed her movement with a mixture of shock, respect, and something approaching fear. The sleeping woman was gone. In her place stood someone none of them had ever really seen before. The rumors spread like wildfire through the base. The woman who sleeps through training is Shadow 7. The recruits were torn between disbelief and the undeniable evidence they had witnessed with their own eyes. Some tried to rationalize what they had seen. Others simply stood in stunned silence. Commander Ross Hale called Elena into his office that evening. She sat across from his desk, her usual sleepy demeanor partially returned, but her eyes remained alert. "Why hide what you are?" Ross asked directly. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of old pain. "Because every time I've shown my true abilities, people have died. I made a promise to myself that I would never pull a trigger again." The full story came out slowly, piece by piece. Elena had been one of the military's most elite covert operatives. Call sign Shadow 7. Her reflexes and tactical instincts were legendary among those with high enough clearance to know about her missions. She had completed dozens of impossible operations, rescued hostages from terrorist strongholds, eliminated high-value targets that conventional forces couldn't reach, saved countless lives through her precision and skill. But on her final mission, she had hesitated for half a second. Just half a second of human doubt in a moment that demanded mechanical perfection. Her teammate died because of that hesitation. "I watched him fall," Elena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I knew that if I had acted a fraction of a second faster, he would still be alive. So I retired. I requested to be transferred to training duty, where I could pretend to be incompetent, where I could convince myself that my skills were gone." Ross leaned back in his chair. "But you can't escape what you are. Today, your instincts saved this entire unit from complete tactical failure. Those recruits learned more in 40 seconds than they would have in 40 hours of regular training." Word of Elena's true identity spread beyond the training ground. Soldiers who had served in classified operations began to recognize the name Shadow 7. Stories emerged from the shadows. Shadow 7 single-handedly extracted a diplomatic team from an embassy under siege. She eliminated an entire terrorist cell without firing a single shot. There was a hostage situation in Kandahar. 23 civilians. Shadow 7 got them all out alive. The young recruit who had called her useless approached Elena in the mess hall, his face red with embarrassment. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I had no idea." Elena looked up from her cold soup. "You don't owe me anything. You saw what everyone was supposed to see. I made sure of that. But why? Why let us treat you like that?" "Because," Elena said quietly, "I needed to believe I was just like everyone else. I needed to believe that the person I used to be was gone." Other soldiers began to approach, not with mockery or complaints, but with quiet respect. They would nod when they passed her, leave space for her at meals, treat her with the deference usually reserved for decorated veterans. Penn, the communications specialist, sat down across from her. "I timed your performance today. Your target acquisition and elimination speed exceeded professional sniper standards. By a significant margin." Elena pushed her food around on her plate. Muscle memory doesn't forget, even when you want it to. That night, in the barracks, the usual jokes and conversations were replaced by whispered discussions. "Did you see the way she moved?" It was like she knew where every target would be before it appeared. "My brother served with special ops. He told me about Shadow 7 once. Said she was like a ghost who could kill you without you ever knowing she was there. And we thought she was just some lazy recruit who didn't belong here." Elena lay on her bunk, listening to the whispers. For 3 years, she had successfully hidden from her past. She had convinced herself that she could become someone ordinary, someone safe, someone who didn't carry the weight of life and death decisions. But Commander Hale was right. You can't escape what you are. The question now was, what would she choose to become? The next morning in the mess hall, Elena sat alone with her breakfast, picking at cold eggs and lukewarm coffee. The usual chatter of the dining area had been replaced by an unusual quiet. The young recruit who had insulted her the day before approached her table. He set down his tray and stood at attention. "Ma'am, I owe you more than an apology. If it weren't for you yesterday, our entire unit would have failed that exercise." Elena looked up, surprised. You don't need to do that. Sit down and eat your breakfast. He sat, but his posture remained respectful. My name is Marcus, ma'am. I wanted you to know that. Other soldiers began to acknowledge her as they passed, not with fanfare or dramatic gestures, but with the simple recognition that passes between professionals. A nod, a respectful "Morning, ma'am," a genuine smile instead of a smirk. Commander Hale stood up in the center of the mess hall, his voice carrying clearly. I want everyone to remember something from yesterday's exercise. The person you thought was your weakest link turned out to be the reason the mission succeeded. Don't ever forget that lesson. He didn't mention Elena by name. He didn't need to. Everyone understood. After he finished speaking, there was no applause, no cheering, but something had fundamentally changed in the room's atmosphere. Elena noticed that the chair next to her remained empty, even though the mess hall was crowded. It wasn't because people were avoiding her. It was because they were giving her space, showing respect in the way that military personnel understand best. A staff sergeant walked by and paused. Shadow 7, if you ever want to come back to active duty, there are units that could use someone with your skills. Elena shook her head. I'm exactly where I need to be. Teaching the next generation is important work too. Later that day, during afternoon training, something remarkable happened. When Elena took her usual spot in the shade, the other recruits didn't whisper or complain. Instead, they trained harder, knowing she was watching. Knowing she was evaluating their performance with the eyes of someone who had been there, who had done things they could only imagine. She still appeared to nap during the easier exercises, but now everyone understood that Shadow 7's rest was the calm before the storm. And when that storm came, she would be ready. The mockery had stopped. The disrespect had ended. In its place was something much more valuable. Genuine respect earned through demonstrated competence. People are quick to label others as lazy or useless based on surface appearances. But sometimes, what looks like laziness is actually someone carrying wounds too heavy to display in public. Elena Cruz didn't sleep through combat drills because she was incompetent. She did it because her past was too painful to fully embrace and her skills too dangerous to casually reveal. It took just one command. Execute, Shadow 7, for the truth to emerge like lightning. The lesson is clear. Don't judge anyone by what you see on the surface. The person you mock today might be the person who saves you tomorrow. Behind every quiet individual might be a story of sacrifice, skill, and strength that would humble anyone who took the time to understand it. If you've ever seen someone quiet do something extraordinary, leave a dot in the comments. And if you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe to SN Quiet Stories.